Hello and welcome back. This is our weekly look at the best schedules, ads, and trends, and you're looking at Tyler Seguin, and he's been one of the most consistent producers in all of fantasy. He is ownable in 12-team leagues, relatively speaking, and Dallas has a 4-game week coming up, so you'll want to have him on your radar. Now, speaking of a 4-game week and Dallas, let's do what we always do and break down the schedule for Week 9. So 50 games this week, you have 7 teams that play 4 times. You're looking at them right here. You have 3 teams that play twice, and those are Anaheim, Tampa Bay, and Los Angeles. So let's hope you face Kucherov this week, as this would be a nice time to face him in a 2-game week. Now, with all of that said, not all of these schedules are created equal. You've got the best schedule, a perfect schedule, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday. Now, Friday and Sunday are not necessarily light, which is why the light night count is off. Usually I classify anything as 6 or under as a light night, but with that said, Dallas plays all of those usual off nights. So they've got a 3-game road swing in Utah, in LA, in Vegas, and then back home against Calgary. So a little bit of travel there, not a ton of travel. They're going from the central time zone over, and then they've got a little bit of a West Coast thing, but then coming back. So not a ton of travel, but it is worth noting that 3 of these are on the road. You also have Toronto with a 3 light night schedule. You've got Chicago. That's a nice matchup there. This is a nice matchup on Wednesday against Nashville. They've got a difficult matchup against the Caps on Friday, and then a back-to-back with travel against Pittsburgh, who should be a winnable game. So 3 winnable games here. A little bit of difficulty here with the back-to-back with travel, but there's not a whole lot on the waiver wire from Toronto, as we will see moving forward. Winnipeg, they've kind of cooled off a little bit. Their team defense has come down significantly, which we'll find out in the goaltending section, as Hellebuck has been unseated as the number 1 goalie on the the goalie hub. But with that said, they've got the Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, which is a little bit less favorable, but they do have a bunch of good matchups here. So St. Louis has played better with the coaching change, but Buffalo's winnable. This game's winnable, and even the back-to-back with travel, this should be a winnable game against Columbus. Now, a lot of these teams play on these Tuesday, Thursdays. You've got 2 light nights from Seattle. They've got this East Coast trip, so all of these on the road, but the travel is a little bit less because they're going from Long Island to New Jersey to New York. That's not a lot of travel, a lot of traffic, but not a lot of travel. And then for the Islanders, they've got some travel in there as well, but they've got a Montreal game that's winnable. This should be a tough game against Seattle. This should be a tough game against Carolina. They shouldn't win that one. And then they've got the back-to-back with travel against Ottawa. So maybe not the best week in general to pick up Islanders, but they do have the 4-game week. There's a back-to-back there. So you could front-load your schedule and then pick up somebody on the weekend for the back-to-back. You also have Colorado here. They've got the Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. This all on the road as well, which is a theme with a lot of these teams. So the last team we'll look at here, Columbus. They've got the West Coast road trip, which is not ideal. Obviously, this Alberta trip is a lot of travel, and you're also, factoring in the fact that they're playing some really good teams. Maybe at the best time, Winnipeg has kind of come back down to earth. Vancouver's still without JT Miller, but they did get Brock Besser back. This is going to be a tough game, and Calgary still 12-8-4. They're playing really well. But with all of that said, the only team that we're going to dive into detail here is that Columbus Blue Jackets team, because they've got the most waiver wire eligible players. So let's look at Columbus. Now, as we look at the 3D graph, one thing that you know off the top is Kent Johnson way up at the top here at 1.4 points per game. He's missed some time, but 8 games, 11 points, and he has points in every single game he's played this season. 4 power play points, shot volume a little bit low, but he is one of the best ads this week. Zach Werenski is absolutely on fire. He's been picking it up over the last couple weeks. He's usually a shot volume guy, almost 4 shots per game, and he's been racking up the points as well. Kirill Marchenko might be another good ad for you. 23 points in 22 games, 5 on the power play, 2.6 shots per game is pretty decent for him. He's a single position right winger, though. You've got Sean Monahan, who was red hot to start the season, had a little bit of a lull, but is coming back again at this point. You've got Voronkov here, 10 points in 13 games, 1.9 shots per game is a little bit low, no power play production really to speak of. But there are a number of guys that we need to talk about. As I zoom in a little bit here, you've got Chinakhov, who gets 1.5 hits per game, 2.6 shots per game. The point totals are a little bit lower than some of the other guys, though. You do have Fantilli there if he's available. Matthew Olivier, 10 points in 22 games, but 3.5 hits per game. We'll take a look at his hub in just a second. So there's a number of guys. Pretty much everybody I just mentioned except for Werenski is available on the waiver wire. So let's start it off by looking at probably your best offensive ad, and that is Kent Johnson. Back off of injury, 15% owned, single position center, 11 points, 4 power play points in 8 games. You can look at the hub here. The shot volume is a little bit low for my taste, but everything else is really nice. He doesn't have a hit or a block on the season, so he doesn't do any of that, and he obviously doesn't have any of those so far this year in the 8 games, but he has been really productive offensively. He's getting power play time. He's in the top 6, so this should be a guy that should definitely be on your radar, and he's been trending up even back since October 20th. He did have this period in the middle where he wasn't playing because he was injured, but still should be a really solid ad. 15%, he should be there for you in a 12-teamer, and maybe even in a 14-team league. He would probably be one of your best options. Now, if you're looking for a little bit of a different flavor here, you've got Voronkov at 5%. This is probably your deep league target. 7 points in his last 6 games, 1 power play point in that span. And you can see here he's been trending up basically since October 31st. Usually, I would expect some of his peripherals to be a little bit better, but they haven't necessarily been off the charts lately. The goals have been pretty good. So 4 goals in his last 6 games is why you would probably try to grab him this week. And he is getting a little bit of power play time. I believe it's power play 2, but nothing crazy there. He's just another option for you in a deep league. Single position left winger is going to be a little bit less ideal, though. Now, if you're looking for penalty minutes, if you're looking for hits, you've got Matthew Olivier. You can see this is kind of cut off here, but he's got 3 goals, 1 assist in his last 6 games. He's got a ton of hits. So 3.45 hits per game on the season is really incredible. And he's been getting those penalty minutes as well, as you can see here, beating up Matt Rempe. He's gotten in a couple fights lately, so if you're in a league with penalty minutes, he's another guy that should be on your radar. And in terms of defensive ads this week, there are 1 or 2 guys that you can get for some hits volume, but there's not a ton. One of the better hit volume guys is going to be Olivier, and he's 9% owned, single position right winger. So he's been getting some goal scoring, as you can see here, 85th percentile in terms of goals. So he's a hitter and a goal scorer, at least for the last couple weeks. He's not necessarily known for his goal scoring, but a huge hits volume guy with some blocks coverage as well and some goals coming lately. He's been a little bit hotter over the past 2 or 3 weeks. I've streamed him in a couple different leagues over the past 3 weeks or so, and he's paid off a little bit here and there. So maybe not the most consistent, but he has been pretty decent for leagues with PIMs and hits. And last but not least, you've got, well, this is not last, but we have one more after this. Sean Monahan, 40% owned. He's probably your safest bet. So he's got 9 points in his last 6 games, very assist heavy, 1 goal, 8 assists. And you can see here he has been higher than this at various points throughout the season, very hot to start the season and kind of trailed off here. But he has been picking it up lately. So shot volume is pretty good at 2.77 shots per game, just under a point per game. Right around the same goal totals as Olivier, which is a little bit concerning if you're a Monahan owner. However, the assists are way, way better, and obviously 93rd percentile there is going to be really nice for you. He is top line. He is top power play. The hits and blocks aren't necessarily there all the time, but with that ice time and with those assignments, he's probably going to be out there against the other team's top players, and maybe that factors in this week because he's going to be playing a lot of really good players and having to check pretty well defensively. So maybe those peripherals come up a bit. The shot volume has been there pretty consistently all year, and then the goal totals were there earlier in the year, so maybe they'll return to form over this upcoming week. Now, last but not least, we've got Kirill Marchenko, 35%, single position right winger, 7 points in his last 4 games, 3 goals, 4 assists, a power play point. He's now back up above a point per game, 95th percentile there. Goal totals are really nice. 0.41 goals per game is a nice pace there. 95th percentile in assists. Shot volume is decent at 2.64 shots per game. Power play numbers are decent at 85th percentile. So 12-team league, any of these guys should be owned up in your 12-team league this week at least. As I mentioned before, there's not a lot off the waiver wire, so this is the number 1 team to pick players from. But if you're looking for some of the overall best performers, some guys who are hot lately, and some guys who have a little bit of volume, we're going to take a look at that on the next slide. To start it off on the forward streams this week, Tyler Seguin, he was on the thumbnail. He's only been held pointless 4 times all season. So I mentioned that with Kent Johnson, how he hasn't been held pointless at all this year. He's played fewer games, though. So Seguin, with the amount of games that he's played, 18 games played on the season, and he's scored in 14 of them. 9 goals, 11 assists on the season. So he's been above a point per game the entire year, basically. He's at a half a goal per game, over half an assist per game. Shot volume at 2.4-ish is okay. The power play time has been there. He's been really consistent in this channel between a 48 and a 52. And as I mentioned, he's been one of the most consistent players in all of fantasy over this stretch, especially one that you can find on the waiver wire and with dual position eligibility. Center right wing at only 42% owned. Not sure why his ownership is at that level. When you look at some of the other guys on Dallas, they're all relatively owned up. And even a guy like Matt Duchene, who has also been pretty good this season, is at 85% rostered. Marchman at 60%. Johnston, who's been really disappointing compared to last year, at 87%. So even Stankoven at 40% doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you look at their production. You've got Seguin with 5 more goals. You've got Seguin, pretty much, I guess they're both dual eligible, but either way, Seguin has been one of the better bright spots on Dallas. On a team that spreads out their offense, he's been really productive all season long. You can count on him. 5 points in his last 4 games, so he is hot coming into this week. And again, they have that perfect Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday schedule. Now, if you can't get him, you can go out and grab Kyle Palmieri. The Islanders do have that 4-game week, as I mentioned before. 3 goals in his last 4 games for Palmieri, 33% owned. So he probably is going to be there for you. Almost all of these Islanders guys are there for you on the waiver wire. They're just not all that productive. They've been blowing leads as per usual. They're not necessarily one of the better, more offensive teams in the league. And nobody is particularly owned up other than Noah Dobson. You've got Barzell, who's out, but he's at 71%. Brock Nelson at 64%. Bo Horvat at 64%. But other than that, Palmieri, Lee, Pajot, a bunch of their depth guys are all available. And Palmieri is the best goal scorer of the bunch. 94th percentile there, just under half a goal per game. 2.29 shots per game is a little low. He does get some power play time. He should be a little bit higher in terms of his power play production. Perhaps that comes this week in a 4-game week, but he's usually one of the more consistent goal scorers that you can go out there and find. That does usually mean that he goes hot and cold, though. So he does have 3 goals in his last 4 games, but prior to that, he didn't score in 5 games before that. So it is worth mentioning that he does go hot and cold, but with that said, he's probably your best goal-scoring option off the Islanders. Now, up next, we've got Gabe Vilardi, who isn't necessarily hot right now, but he has gotten hot at the previous points in this season, and he is a relatively consistent streaming option. His shot volume is a little bit lower than what I've come to expect from him. He's usually a 2.5 to 3 shot per game guy. The shot volume has been there in the last couple of games, 3-shot game, 4-shot game, but when he was scoring, that stretch from 10/24 all the way up to November 12th, he was averaging 3, 4, 4 shots per game, and the shot volume has come down in the past couple of games. So in the last 3, he's got 3 shots, 1 shot, 4 shots. But before that, 1, 1, 1, 1, 0. So if he's shooting the puck, he will be more offensively productive. You can see here 11 points in 10 games in that span from the 24th to the November 12th. So you got to hope that he's going to shoot the puck. And if he does, he's going to be really productive for you. That center right wing dual position eligibility is nice, 46%. This is what I don't understand, though. He's not quite as good as Tyler Seguin, as we mentioned, who's above a point per game, who's above at a half a goal per game, and basically double this assist volume, higher shot volume, and yet he's lower ownership. So that's why Seguin is probably one of your best ads this week. But if you can't get him, and if Vilardi is available for whatever reason, Winnipeg has had the better offense this year, so that is worth mentioning as well. They don't necessarily spread it around as much as Dallas, but they do get some guys in on that scoring. So Vilardi should be one of those guys as long as he's shooting the puck. Now, up next, we've got a guy who I mentioned last week, and that is Connor Garland. They had the 4-game week last week, and Garland made that count. 4 goals, 6 assists, 10 points, 4 power play points, and he's got a 7-game point streak going on right now. You can see here he's just a shade under a point per game. In last week's video, I said he was on pace for a career season at around 63 points on the season. He's obviously ticked up since I mentioned that, so This is, close to an 80-point season if he can continue this pace. It is interesting to question whether or not he can do that. Brock Besser has come back into the lineup, but Garland seems to be solidified in that top 6. 45% owned, single position right winger, but he's red hot right now. 2.32 shots per game is okay. The goal production is okay as well. Assists are really nice, 0.59 assists per game, and the power play numbers are nice. As you can see here, 4 power play points in this 7-game point streak. So he's one of the more hot players that you can find, not in a 4-game week. However, you do want to stay on top of these trends and find these guys that are going really well right now, and he's definitely doing so right now. Now, up next is a home account for me, a guy I picked up a week or two ago in my categories league, Will Goalie, 39% owned, single position left winger. He is the Rangers' number 2 point scorer, and he is tied for 15th in the NHL in even strength scoring. So he doesn't get any power play time, which is a detriment to his fantasy file. But one thing that he does do is he hits everything in sight. 4.14 hits per game, 99th percentile there. So even better than a guy like Olivier, who we mentioned earlier, and yet he's got way more offensive production. 4 goals, 4 assists, 8 points, 32 hits in his last 7 games, but it goes a little bit longer than that. Basically, all season, Will Goalie has been relatively productive for the Rangers, who have been struggling to get their big guys going. But in 22 games, 9 goals, 10 assists, 19 points. Really impressive for a young guy like Will Goalie in his 2nd season in the NHL. Again, they have a 3-game week this upcoming week, so maybe not the most volume play that you're going to get, but in terms of guys who are going to get you those hits coverage, you're looking at least 12 hits on the week from Goalie, plus maybe some offensive production, a couple points here and there. He's been moved up in the lineup. They had him with Berard and Mika Zibanejad, trying to get Zibanejad going, and Will Goalie just keeps chugging along and driving whatever line he's on. So definitely worth a stream if you're in a categories league or even in a points league where you're getting point weighting for hits. He's been really good in that regard, and he's been getting some offensive production as well. You can see this 64 is one of the higher numbers you're going to see in terms of all of these players. So with all that said, even without the power play time, he's been really productive for a categories league with hits as one of the main factors. Now, up next, we've got Yegor Sharangovich, a guy I mentioned in the offseason. He was off to a slow start. You can see here really low. Whoops, got to go back. And really low, and then kind of breaking out over the past couple weeks here. So 3 goals, 2 assists, 5 points, 3 power play points, and 25 shots in his last 6 games. The other thing to note with his file, dual eligible, and he's 26% owned. So maybe a little bit better in terms of availability for if you're looking for positional flexibility and you can't go out and get a guy like Velarde, you can't go out and get a guy like Sagan. Sharangovich has been relatively hot lately. He did have a 4-game point streak. He got held scoreless against Columbus on the 29th. But with that said, he has been red hot lately. So a guy that you can pick up, 25% ownership, center, right wing, dual eligible. And Calgary's been steadily chugging along. They don't necessarily have a ton of offensive talent. Nobody on that team when I looked at them last was above 0.7 points per game. But Sharangovich has been ticking up lately, and the shot volume is nice, 3.18 shots per game, and he's getting some power play time. So with Mantha out, maybe that elevates him a little bit higher in the lineup. But with that said, he has been a goal scorer in the past. He had 30 last season, and kind of a nice little surprise coming over from New Jersey in that deal that brought Markstrom over. So he's been a really nice fit in Calgary, and at 26% ownership for dual eligibility, you could do a lot worse than Sharangovich. Our last forward ad for this week is William Eklund. I mentioned him when we covered the Sharks, and he's been going off basically throughout that time and then onward into last week. So 2 goals, 8 assists, 10 points, 2 power play points in his last 8 games. He's a little bit under a point per game, but 92nd percentile there, 97th percentile in assists. You're getting exposure to Celebrini. I don't remember if they're on the same line, but they do play on the same power play unit. He is going to get you some power play points. The shot volume is a little bit low for my taste. He's not necessarily a goal scorer, which is why the shot volume and goal scoring is low. You're not getting a ton of peripherals, but if you're in a league that weighs power play assists or power play points, he is going to get those relatively frequently. Again, 2 power play points in the last 8 games isn't crazy, but a ton of assist coverage, and you're getting steady point production from him. He's only 24% owned. I believe he's a single position center, as I look that up right now. Single position left winger. So They're playing tonight. I'm recording this midday Saturday. He's currently on a 4-game point streak with 6 points in his last 4 games. So he's still red hot. Even with that, the last 8 games, it's even been, a shorter time frame than that he's been going. So definitely have him on your radar. Celebrini's not all owned up as well. So if you are in a short league or shallow league, Celebrini, I believe, is at 56% rostered. So you could get access to him, but if you can't get him, William Eklund has been a nice complimentary piece for the San Jose Sharks. Up next, we're taking a look at defensive streamers. We've got a couple of guys who are not on 4-game weeks. We'll start with them. Then we'll go over the guys with the 4-game schedules. And we're going to start it off with a guy you probably know is owned up at this point. But if he's not, Jake Wallman, 53% ownership, way higher than it was earlier in the season. 2 goals, 3 assists, 5 points in a 4-game point streak. Wallman has only been held pointless twice since October 28th. He was injured in a little bit of that stretch, but you can look here at his hub. 2.9 shots per game is excellent. The assist numbers, 94th percentile there. He does get some shot blocks, 1.38 blocks per game, and 0.81 points per game is really good for a team that's not very offensively capable. They have been much better with Celebrini back in the lineup, and you're going to want that exposure to Celebrini because he is the power play quarterback on PP1. So if he is available, definitely go out and scoop him up if you're in a 10-team league and he is, for whatever reason, still on the waiver wire. If you cannot get Jake Wallman, their other defenseman, power play 2 quarterback, Timothy Liljegren, has been playing pretty well as well. So 2 goals, 1 assist, 3 points, a power play point, and he's got a 3-game point streak right now. You can see here from his hub, he was very unownable. This was all basically with Toronto. He gets the trade and starts to improve with some added ice time. He's got 1.33 blocks per game, 1.4 hits per game is nice. 1.73 shots is a little bit low, but with that said, he is the power play 2 quarterback, so his point numbers should increase just slightly. Maybe not the best ad in general, but if you're in a really deep league, he's a power play guy who's going to get time if Wallman misses time, or if they're going to give some of that second power play unit, give them some time to spread things out a little bit. But either one of these guys is probably a decent bet if you're looking for a power play quarterback, because there's not a whole lot on the waiver wire. But we do have another power play quarterback option who has emerged over the past couple of weeks, and that is Aaron Ekblad, 51% owned. So similar to Jake Wallman, between the two of them, I would prefer to have Wallman. But with that said, Ekblad, 6 assists, 2 power play points in his last 7 games. So been getting a little bit of offensive production. The only problem with him this year is the shots are very low, 1.38 shots per game, which means no goals on the season. He's at a 0.5 point per game. Hits and blocks are decent, 1.54 hits per game, 1.38 blocks per game. He did bump up to a 48 and then dropped off and has been steadily climbing since then. So it is a decent kind of mixed bag file. When I've owned Ekblad over the past couple of years, he has had much higher shot volume than this. He's been closer to 2.5, 3 shots per game in the past. So if he starts to shoot, some of those goals may start to come in the near future. And he is seemingly the number 1 power play guy in Florida. So you're going to want exposure to all of those offensive weapons. So to get that at 51% ownership is pretty decent. He probably won't be there for you in a 12-teamer. He might be there for you in a 10-team league. But just wanted to highlight a couple of guys who are really hot right now that you can probably get that are power play quarterbacks. But if you're looking for those schedule plays, the guys that are going to get the 4-game weeks, we'll start it off by looking at what we normally do, which is looking at volume. In a week where you're getting 4 games, you're probably not going to get a ton of offensive production because a lot of these guys are owned up already. So if you're just looking for hits and blocks volume, Simone Benoit, 2% owned, 11 hits in the last 3 games. He's been known for that. His hits numbers were much higher last season, and they're starting to tick up again. 2.1 hits per game, 1.7 blocks per game, not much else to speak of. He's mainly a 2-tool specialist in terms of hits and blocks, but in a week like this where they're going to get a 4-game week, this is where you would ride that and try to get as much volume as you can. 2%, he should be there for you in pretty much every league size. As I mentioned before, there are a couple of forwards to look at. Will Cooley, over 4 hits per game, as one of those guys that we talked about. You also have Olivier, who we talked about earlier on. But if you're looking for that hits production on the back end, Benoit is a pretty decent ad there. Now up next, we've got Dante Fabro. This is a little bit of an interesting file, getting waived by Nashville, coming over to Columbus and finding a nice home in Columbus for the last couple of games. So since he got claimed by Columbus, 2 goals, 2 assists, 10 hits, and 16 blocks. Could be that new team bump, a little bit more ice time and a little bit more responsibility. 1.64 blocks is nice. Everything else is relatively low. So you're mainly just hoping to, in a deep league, pick him up and get some offensive production and some hits and blocks in that span. This is a 6-game span, so 10 hits in 6 games is not great, but it's better than the 0.93 hits per game he's been averaging. And then the 16 blocks is a little bit more than this 1.64 blocks per game average on the season. So he's been getting it done lately. You got to hope that this improves as they go into this 4-game week. I could have put him on the Blue Jackets slide, but that was pretty much all the forwards. So we'll mention him here at 5%. He should be there for you in any league size. Now, this guy does not quarterback a power play, but he has been a pretty decent streaming option at various points throughout the season. Sam Girard, 1 goal, 2 assists, 3 points in his last 4 games. You can see his trend just trending up steadily over the entire season, and that's with guys returning back from injury. He's at a little bit more than a half a point per game, so pretty much right on pace or a little outpacing Aaron Ekblad, who does get power play time. So that shows you how much he's been producing at 5-on-5. 1.83 blocks per game is nice, 92nd percentile there. 1 hit per game is not bad for a smaller, undersized defenseman, more offensive type in Girard. You would hope that the goals will come. The shot volume has not been there. That's how that goal total will increase if he starts to shoot the puck more. But with that said, there's not a whole lot in terms of defensive ads. Manson hasn't been as great this year. Taves is pretty much owned up, so there's not a whole lot off the waiver wire that you can get from Colorado. He's been a guy that you can at 13%. So if he's available, a 4-game week for Colorado, and now they're getting those guys back. Nichushkin's back. He's a little bit over 50% ownership. So if Nichushkin's there, definitely go out and grab him. I didn't mention him here because I figured all of you are smart enough to know that you should have stashed him in your draft. A lot of our guys in the Discord group did so. So Nichushkin is back. Drouin has been improving lately. Lehkonen has been, at least he's healthy now, and he was productive when he first got back. He's sort of slipped a little bit, but getting exposure to those guys through Girard at 13%, you could do a lot worse than that. And then one last player to go over, that is Riker Evans. So if you look at all of the point totals for these D, 0.63 points per game is really nice for a guy who's only 20% owned in Riker Evans. He does get a couple of power play points, 1 power play point in his last 7 games to go along with 5 assists and 12 blocks. So 1.67 blocks per game on the year, 88th percentile there. 1.63 hits per game is nice as well. He does get a little bit of power play 2 time, and he was on the first pair, but the note here is that Vince Dunn should be back any day now. They had him listed as potentially coming back today as I'm recording this. I'm not sure if he actually will be in the lineup, but that means Riker Evans may get slotted a little bit further down in the lineup. So this is kind of like a higher risk play in terms of grabbing him now when Dunn is coming back. He might lose that PP2 spot because you'd have to imagine they're going to use Dunn on one of those 2 units and Montour on the other. And then Evans will probably not be top defensive pair anymore. So I did want to throw him out there because he has been really productive over the past, month and a half. And you can see here going from a 39 up to a 53 and then kind of staying in this 49 to 53 range, slowly down ticking over the past couple of weeks, but pretty much relatively consistent in this channel. But do want to mention that he will lose a little bit of ice time with Dunn coming back. On the Goalie Hub, the first thing I notice is that Hellebuck is no longer number 1, and it's not necessarily his fault. So you look at the team defense over there on the right, down to 66th percentile. Here's what it looks like in terms of expected goals against per game on a 5-game moving average. You can see this uptick basically from the early part of November, jumping up into the 3 goals against range and staying there for most of November. So this is why he is now down to 2nd. So worth noting that maybe if you want to start Comrie, it's not as safe of a bet as it used to be because of the team defense in front of them. Now, with all that said, in terms of the starters or the 1A, 1B situations that you can add for this week, we're going to start it off by looking at Peter Mrazek. He should be available on every wire, at least in a 12-team league. Some leagues are obviously well aware that he makes a ton of saves, 94th percentile in terms of total save volume. 30% owned. He's got 2 wins in his last 4 starts, 2.25 goals against, and a 929 save percentage. So he's been trending up basically the entire season, a little bit of a dip here, but back up, and he's continued that excellent play. He's 14th on the hub. So a goalie this high at only 30% ownership, he's right there above Igor Shesterkin, which is absolutely crazy. You can just take a quick look and see why the Rangers are struggling here. 6th percentile in terms of team expected goals against per game, over 3.5. That's a huge problem for the Rangers. They just picked up a win as I was recording this video against Montreal. They desperately needed that. But in terms of other goaltenders that you can potentially look at, we mentioned this guy earlier in the season, Alex Lyon. He was really good back in mid to early October, I guess, like mid to late October, then started to falter a little bit. He had a couple games where he was excellent and then fell off a cliff here from a 66 down to a 40. He's now picked it back up in his last 2 games. Last 2 starts, 2 wins, 1.5 goals against, 942 save percentage. But he is currently out with a lower body injury, so it is Cam Talbot's net, and Talbot is all the way up here at 18th on the goalie hub. You can see him well above expected, 95th percentile in that metric, despite the fact that the team defense is pretty bad. So if you own Talbot, hold on to him for now. If you're looking for a streamer, I doubt Lyon gets in this week. They've got 3 games, and they're all pretty separate, no back-to-backs, but just something to keep in mind. He has been hot lately. If you are looking for that starter, you could look at Karel Vejmelka. I mentioned him last week. He's continued to climb into this week. He's got 8 consecutive starts. They have a back-to-back today. I don't know if he's going again, but he just lost to the Edmonton Oilers last night, and he played pretty well until they started to turn it on later in the game. But in those 8 consecutive starts, a 2.3 goals against and a 907 save percentage. He's 97th percentile in goals saved above expected, 917 save percentage on the year. For whatever reason, he just does not get the wins that some other goaltenders get with this basic stat line. So he's got excellent skill level, excellent save percentage, and goals against, and yet they're not getting the wins for him. The team defense is not great either, but he is the number 1 right now. They have Connor Ingram out, so he's been getting a heavy workload. At 26% ownership, he should be one of the best starters available in a 12-team league format. Now, another guy who has kind of reemerged after being injured is John Gibson. You can see his trend going up, everything you like to see there if you own Gibson. He is well above expected, 87th percentile there. 2 wins in his last 4 starts, 2.23 goals against, and a 921 save percentage. You look at the full year sample size, 4 wins in 6, 2.5 goals against, and a 916 save percentage. So, earlier in the season, one of the best goaltenders in all of fantasy was his 1A, 1B counterpart, Lucas Dostal. Dostal's still playing pretty well. He's still relatively high at a 65. The team defense is atrocious, obviously, at 3.8 expected goals against per game, but he is 100th percentile, goals saved above expected. Save volume was through the roof. So Dostal is still a good option when he is in, but they have been giving some more starts to John Gibson, who has been responding pretty well to those starts and getting some wins. Anaheim is a lot more competitive this year than they have been in years past, so that's worth noting as well. Now, another guy that probably is a backup option, maybe not as much in terms of start volume, but a guy that definitely should be on your radar. I've mentioned him here before, and that is, if I can find him as I'm speaking, Joonas Korpisalo, which I do see him up here at 24th on the hub. And the reason is he's been, the defense has not been as bad as some people think in terms of expected goals against. Swayman has not been on his game. But on top of that, Korpisalo is above expected, almost 2.5 goals better than expected. Goals against is fine at 2.5 goals against, 907 save percentage, also fine. That's above league average. 5 wins in 10 games. You'd like to see that a little bit better, but they're just not getting the run support. But he's been performing well. So 2 wins in his last 2 starts, 1.5 goals against, and a 937 save percentage. I believe he's going today. He's 20% owned. So if you see him in the net with this new coach bounce, I don't know how well they're responding to Joe Sacco. I haven't been watching the games, but usually teams do get a bump with the new coach, and Swayman has not taken advantage of it. So for the time being, you should run out and grab Korpisalo. Now, if you are looking for a starter and you don't particularly like Vejmelka, there is another name. I mentioned him last time, and that is in the wake of Darcy Kemper's injury. Dave Riddick has been getting a ton of starts. Big save Dave. He's up here at 21 on the hub. And it's been 7 consecutive starts before the last game that they gave to Portillo, who played pretty well in that game. Only 3 wins in those 7 starts, but You can see here the team defense is the main reason you'd own him, 97th percentile there. And of those 7 starts, he's only had 2 bad ones. He had one with an 800 save percentage and one with a 667. But every other start, he's had a 929 save percentage or better. So it's a couple of bad games sprinkled in with very excellent games. He is below expected, probably because of those 2 games. Or there's been a couple in the past where he was the backup and didn't necessarily play all that well. But he has been playing pretty well lately, 28% owned. So he should be there for you in a 12-team league. I own him. He's been playing pretty well for me. In my category league, 8 wins in 15 games, 2.5 goals against is nice. The save percentage should come up if he can get those bad games out of his system. And even with that, Portillo, who did get in the 1 game, is that high. He's not in here because he doesn't have a big track record. It's literally 1 game, but he had a 966 save percentage. So any LA Kings goaltender is a good goaltender, and right now Riddick is getting the start volume at 28%. You should go out and grab him if you can. Now, another potential starter that you can find, Elvis Merzlikins, kind of the opposite. Not the best team defense, not the worst at 44th percentile. 4 wins in his last 5 starts, but the numbers are bad. So 3.34 goals against, 884 save percentage in those last 5 starts. But he has been winning games. So if you're in a points league that weighs those wins a little bit heavier, he's at least been getting you those. He is below expected. The team defense isn't great. The save percentage isn't great. 7 wins in 14 games, but he has been getting a bunch of start volume. So at 18% ownership, if you're in a points league and you just need those wins, he's a guy that you can probably go to while he's hot and continue to ride that wave. If you're looking for another guy who's a temporary starter, you've got Sam Ersson out still. All of this looks pretty mid, and that's pretty much to be expected in terms of what you're going to get out of Flyers goaltending. But with that said, you have Kolosov down here. His ownership is very low. 2 wins in 6 games, not the best save percentage, not the best numbers in general. But you also have Fedotov at 9%, and you can see his trend going up. He's finally starting to find his game a little bit. 2 wins in his last 4 starts, 2.7 goals against, 904 save percentage. You could do a lot worse than that, and Philadelphia is a scrappy team. They have been scoring a little bit better lately. They still need their power play to get going, but with all that said, to get a starter on a team that is competitive at 9% ownership, he should be there for you in a deep league. You could probably find him in a 12-team as well. He may not be the best option in a 12-teamer, but for those deep league plays, this is a decent option. And then last and probably least, I probably have to scroll down pretty far to find him, Spencer Martin. So we are still missing Kochetkov and Anderson in Carolina. So that means Spencer Martin at 9% ownership has started in 6 consecutive games. They're playing right now, so we only have 5 data points on this. 2 wins in those 5 games, 3.26 goals against, 862 save percentage. You don't want any of those numbers, but with that said, you're getting the starter on a really good defensive team, 78th percentile in terms of team expected goals against per game. So Spencer Martin has been playing okay enough. They did beat the Rangers the other night in a close game. He wasn't bad, wasn't great, didn't have to cover up a lot of defensive mistakes, though. They just kind of throw the puck from wherever they can get a shot off, and he tends to make those low danger saves. So maybe not the best option, but at 9% ownership in a deep league, to get a guy who's playing on a really good defensive team, you could do a lot worse than that. Did want to quickly mention that I can't find him here because he's kind of up and down all over the place, but Tristan Jarry did win his last 2 starts. He had a good start the last game against Boston, a 2-1 win. I don't know if I'd go there yet. He still hasn't necessarily proven it, and Pittsburgh is still a dumpster fire, but just did want to mention that he did get two quality starts in there, 2 wins, and as I look up his ownership percentage, he's only 11% owned. So he's playing I don't know if he's actually in tonight. I think it's Nedeljkovic tonight, but he did play last night and played pretty well. So just a couple of options for you there. We're going to close out the video here. Let me know who you've got your eye on in the comments section below. I'll try to read and answer as many comments as I can. It is a very busy time of year with all the holidays coming up and whatnot. I wish you guys, if you're in the United States, I hope you had a good Thanksgiving. Thanks again for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.